Hey guys, welcome to BAVOY. My name is Michael Soto, and today we're going to talk about how to make relationships work. So for many years I've been studying the Gottman method, and the Gottman method is probably the only research-based relationship therapy that you can find out there. So there's a lot of different types of modalities. The Gottman method is literally the only one that's been researched for over 40 years. So today we're going to talk about three big principles that break down into 7 smaller principles, and I'm going to break all these things down. Let's get started. Okay, so anytime I work with couples, I'm always looking at 3 areas. They're not really principles, but they're basically 3 general areas. The first thing that I'm looking for is the friendship system. How is it that 2 people come together and they relate to each other? How is it that they're managing conflicts with each other? And then the last thing is called the shared meaning system, which is basically how does that couple create purpose with each other? So the first thing that I'm going to break down are the elements of the friendship system. So the friendship system is comprised of 3 principles: love maps, sharing fondness and admiration, and turning towards, right? So what are love maps? So if you can kind of think, anytime you meet someone, the first thing that you do is that you want to get to know them. So you ask them their name. If you're on a date, you may ask, interests that they may have to maybe gauge a little bit of compatibility. But building love maps is literally just getting to know each other cognitively. So by the way, even though I'm talking about relationships and maybe this is more like from an intimate standpoint, this is building relationships like across every spectrum. So if you want to build a better relationship with your parents or with your siblings or with a friend, these are the same elements that would be in basically any relationship, right? So we speak about love maps in terms of like just getting to know someone cognitively, getting to know their inner world. The next step above that would be sharing fondness and admiration. And sharing fondness and admiration literally is, how do you make emotional deposits into the other person's emotional bank account, right? So how is it that you share love? How is it that you share what you like about that person, right? There was a very good book that was written a while back ago on the 5 love languages, and technically speaking, you can show fondness and admiration in any one of these 5 ways, but I'll save that one for a different video. The last one is turning towards versus turning away, and that is, how is it that you make bids for connection, and then how is it that the other person either accept those bids for connection or sometimes turn away those bids of connection, or in really bad cases, turn against those bids of connection, right? So all 3 of those principles comprise what's called the friendship system. So the next thing that we want to talk about is managing conflicts. And managing conflicts, I want to say that every single relationship is going to have conflicts, right? So how we learn how to manage conflicts is going to be really important. But the next level up is actually called the positive perspective. And what I call the positive perspective is basically the attitude that people have within the context of their relationship. So there's only 2 ways to go with this. You either have a positive perspective or you have a negative perspective. And many times when I'm talking to couples about how it is that they manage conflicts, depending on how severe certain things are, they may be suffering from something called negative sentiment override. And negative sentiment override is when couples have been arguing so long about certain things that they even start to change neutral conversation into something that really feels negative. So someone can say, "Hey, sweetie, good morning," and the other person's like, "Good morning? What do you mean by that?" Talking about the positive perspective is really just an attitude. So I usually say that if the first 3 levels of the sound relationship house, the first 3 principles are in order, then people usually have a good positive perspective, and hopefully they can manage conflicts well, right? And managing conflicts, we start talking about things like, how do people accept influence from each other? How do people repair in the middle of a conflict, right? And by the way, you notice that I keep on talking about managing conflicts and not conflict resolution, because technically speaking, 70% of all conflict in relationship is perpetual. So the same thing that you started with year one when you were dating, 20 years later, you're kind of dealing with the same thing. And if I have younger couples, they're like, oh my God, I don't want to hear that. That sounds horrible. And if I have older couples, they're like, wow, that makes total sense right now. So when I kind of share this idea of like managing conflicts as one of the principles, and this will probably be a video by itself, by the way, because there's so much into the idea of the skill of managing conflicts. So just to give you a little brief overview, next we're going to talk about the shared meaning system. So let's talk about creating shared meaning. So when I first started doing therapy, I used to think that the friendship system was like the most important aspect, right? And clients used to come in, I used to say, so tell me what's going on. And inadvertently, almost 8 out of 10 times, they would say something like, Mike, if you can just help us communicate better, I think that we would be okay. And they were talking about managing conflicts. The problem is that if they focus totally on just managing conflicts, they would be experts at managing conflicts and they would almost be like the perfect lawyers. But it's the friendship system that helps buffer the conflict. So if I try to explain that, I want you to imagine that you have guests over your house and you serve something like a meal with red wine. And then you have people at the table and you have a beautiful home and there's a rug underneath and someone spills that red wine. What would you do? Well, most people would be very gracious and say, it's okay. And they'll get some towels and they'll just kind of clean it up and it's no big deal. Well, if your spouse does that and the relationship is not in a good place, then there may be a lot of conflict around that because again, I kind of spoke about that whole positive perspective, right? Well, even though managing conflicts is important and building the friendship system buffers conflict, what all life is really about is meaning making. It's really about like, how is it that you create meaning within the context of that relationship? So there's two things that we want to talk about. The first thing that we want to talk about is making life dreams come true, which is how is it that each of you help the other in their life dreams? So if this person wants to be a nurse and this person wants to be a police officer, then how is it that you support each other in school? How is it that you support each other in, how high you want to go in each of your careers? And then of course, the next one is what's called creating shared meaning, which is how is it that you create a shared sense of purpose? So each one of you are individuals, but then when you come together, who are you as a couple, right? So when you walk into a room, what do people say about you when you walk in that room? It's like, hey, here comes Michael and Christine. Hey, they're always, so chipper and happy, or they're always, helping people, or they're always doing this. And they create a sense of oneness that is presented as the couple to the world, right? And hopefully that makes sense. All right, guys, so today we basically went over the 3 areas and the 7 principles of the sound relationship house theory, which was given to us by the Gottman Institute. And it talks about the 7 ways that you can really make your relationship work. So I usually tell my clients, if you look at what the 7 principles are and you kind of just match your behavior, if I say that, against the 7 principles, you pretty much have a roadmap as to whether it is that you're doing well, not doing well, and where it is that you need to look. And of course, if things get a little bit too hairy and rocky and we need some expert or professional assistance, you could always come and check us out. We'll have information in the description down below. Thanks for watching.